Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock. We're going to get started for our April meeting. Thank you all for coming tonight. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak during the citizens addressing the board, please grab the form off the counter as you walk in the room in the back and pass it to Michelle Oxley, please. At this time, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Michelle, will you please do roll call?
Ms. Hamilton,
Present.
Mrs. Simonetti, Ms. Sharp, Mr. Reddy,
Here.
Ms. Acton,
Here.
Mr. Dobies, and Ms. Hunt.
Here. Thank you, Michelle. At this time, I would move to approve the agenda. Have a motion to move to approve the agenda, please.
I move to approve the agenda.
Support.
Thank you. Motion, support, any deliberation? Hearing none. All those in favor of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move to item number 5, Superintendent's Report.
Good afternoon, everybody, and as Ms. Hunt said, welcome to our April meeting. I'm going to cover a couple of things because we obviously got a lot of things we want to get to as the meeting progresses, but I'll walk through a few of them. So tonight we're going to take a look at a Neola policy packet update. Our policy committee met over at the beginning of April, and most of these policies are strictly driven by law, and we'll kind of walk through them briefly. There were 3 policies that are sitting at policy committee, or three items that are sitting at policy committee that need a little additional work. And so what I'm going to ask the board to do, specifically, the policy written to have a conversation about therapy dogs. Our attorney has some questions on that policy and feels the language could use a little bit of wordsmithing prior to adoption. And so what I would like to do is invite interested parties to potentially meet with Brendan Beer and kind of walk through that policy. I would do the exact same thing, Ms. Hamilton, for the welcoming position that you presented. I think, again, there's a couple of concerning lines in there. And again, there's just some areas that Mr. Beer feels presents liabilities for the district. And then with regards to student representation on the board, all of those policies at committee, and I think the committee and I think Ms. Simonetti and Ms. Acton were there, could share more. There's simply some meat on the bone that needs to be fleshed out with regards to student representation and what the board is looking for. What do they want? What's the end goal? And kind of start with the end in mind. And I'm not sure yet that the policy as written provides that vehicle. So again, that was where we came from for policy, and I didn't want to leave those 2 sitting out there for too long, or those 3 policies sitting out there for too long. Again, policy committee would like to be able to have that discussion, but I think what they're looking for is those authors to potentially sit with Mr. Beer and walk through the language so that the attorney can kind of vet that through for the district.
Cheryl and Marilyn, any additional information? I know you all were present for the meeting on April 8th. Anything else you would like to add to what Jeff just presented?
I think he covered it at this point. We all got the email also, in addition, from Mr. Beal covering these 3 policies and the explanations for why they were being held.
Thank you.
Sorry, why they're being held? I think referred forward is probably the better way to phrase that.
Yeah, I'm good with Superintendent Beal's explanation also, that we just need to have it looked at by our lawyer Brendan Beer, and maybe the MASB lawyers too. So,
Point of clarity,
Yes.
are we going to discuss this again in discussion item 8? Is this also, are we preempting that discussion? My paper still says 8. Did we change it?
The only thing in 8 is the Neola update discussion, so it's just the Neola policies. That's all
So are
that's in
you,
it.
so what are you talking about right now? Are you talking about Neola policies right now as well, or no?
No, I was referring to 3 policies that this board has taken up over the last couple of meetings, specifically.
Did those
they're-
come during the policy meeting?
They came up in policy, yes.
Okay, so we're not, you're saying we're not going to talk about that during the Neola update, which also includes the meeting that they had?
That's correct.
Why wouldn't we do that? I'm confused. Help me understand that.
Well,
Help me understand.
again, I mailed it out to you and I just shared it with you here that the
So I
committee.
understand what you said. What I'm trying to understand is why we're not talking about that during the discussion portion of Neola. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Because we're not prepared at this time to recommend it for approval.
So that update couldn't come at that time, is what you're saying. You need to tell us before then because you don't want to have any discussion around it, or?
No, then I'm having the discussion. That's
Okay,
why
so
I brought it up
this
here.
is what I'll say then, and I still may end up saying some more at that time. But if Brendan Beer is the one that you want us to hear from regarding those policies, he's gonna need to come to a board meeting. I was informed last time that the Neola person couldn't come after 6 o'clock, and I can only be at meetings after 6 o'clock. So he's gonna need to come to a meeting that's after 6 o'clock at minimum, so that I can be involved in that meeting. Because again, I'm on the policy committee, and me not being able to be at that meeting because our Neola person, which I really think we should consider changing, because it shouldn't be that board members who have jobs and lives and, you know, other ways of supporting their families, if we can't get here till 6, they should be able to accommodate us. And so since they can't, and if they won't, at least at the minimum, have Brendan Beer come at a time when we all can have a conversation with him, which we can maybe do that at a board meeting. I'm okay with that, or just make sure it's after 6 o'clock so that I can be in that meeting.
Again, at the pleasure of the board, I think the conversation is, I think Mr. Beer has some concerns with some of the language specific in that, and he'd be happy to wordsmith or work that with you. But I think that was really the point of that particular conversation with regards to the welcoming district. I think exactly the same conversation around therapy dogs. Mr. Beer has some concerns about a couple of the items in there as far as the liabilities that they create for the district. And so again, same conversation, an opportunity to sit down and look at those. And then again, like I said, I think probably where the policy committee sat with regard to student representation is that we're simply, I don't know that as a board, we've got that end in mind, and does this policy accomplish that end? And so I think that's just a work group conversation is how I took it. And again, Marilyn and Cheryl, I think that's a fair representation of where you left me. Mr. Dobies, did you have a question or?
Yeah. I read that we're having a MASB award of distinction, but since you opened up a conversation on these policies, I think I'm a board member. I've served in Jackson for over a decade, and I can't wrap my head around like the process for all of this stuff. I find it highly irregular. And I think at least maybe it's just me struggling to understand, but I feel like I don't really understand how we're supposed to have discussion as a board when we can't add things to the agenda. That discussion is happening at a policy committee with a super minority of this board. Concerns are being raised with that subcommittee without any discussion here at the board, even with the author of that policy, because I've authored both the transparency dogs and the student representation on the board. At the last meeting, I attempted to place both of those for discussion in front of this board. I've had, without violating the Open Meetings Act, discussion with a fair amount of the board members here about my thoughts on therapy dogs, facility dogs. I have pursued and researched this well enough. I've talked to the public a good amount about this. I have produced the therapy dog policy. I actually sat down with the superintendent twice last year to talk about the policy and to see if you were all right with the policy. Intended to bring it up for discussion at the last meeting, and was told that it was referred to the policy committee, not by this group. So I kind of feel like we didn't get the opportunity to have that discussion. That concerns me for a couple of different issues. One, that we're not having that debate here and discussion about what that looks like in front of the public. Two, there's not an opportunity for me to speak about it in front of the board and debate the merits of the idea before we even go into detail on some of the language around it, with paying our attorney to do that, just to debate. And I have a fair idea of where some of us stand up here, but to have that full board conversation about the policies in an open discussion, in a transparent way, so that we can then decide, is this something that we want to do? Similar to Trustee Hamilton's resolution, for us to debate the resolution, decide how we want to dispose of that resolution, whether we want to pass it, whether we want to reject it, whether we want to send it to policy committee with such direction to do X, Y, and Z. The same thing with the therapy dogs, the same thing with the student representation in February, maybe in January. We had like a 4-hour meeting talking about a variety of different issues, student representation being one of them. We heard comment from every single member of this board about whether they supported having student representation on the board, how they supported it. I actually gave my feedback that I think we should just go to student council, the student government, listen to all of the feedback, some of which was this board should appoint someone to serve, a student to serve on the board. The policy that I wrote struck a balance between those two viewpoints, which I tried to put on to the meeting last time to discuss that. And all of a sudden it's at the policy committee, and not surprising, people at the policy committee have questions about it. We're told that like there's concerns. We're not, whatever the, we're unsure about the goals of the board. We literally had a 4-hour discussion about what the board wanted and the ideas from the board. And we have to start somewhere from some policy to debate that as a board and then figure out what we want to do with it. I'm kind of getting a little frustrated that everything has to come through one person that continues to say we're not prepared to make recommendations for approval, when we haven't even had a discussion on this board directing what we want the administration to do.
I think the challenge that you might run into, Derek, is when board members write policy, they often, they copy language from other places, or they often add language that creates liabilities or legal challenges for the district. And those aren't languages that we're prepared to present, and we shouldn't be debating without having an attorney walk through those. We buy our policies from Neola, and we could buy them from Troon if you'd rather spend it for another set of attorneys, but we buy our policies from Neola because they are policy experts for the Midwest area. It is their job to vet all of our policies. It's their job to make certain that we're in compliance with the law. So how we've handled it since predates me, since before I arrived here, is Jackson Public Schools adopts policy by bringing policy through the policy committee. But candidly, this is still in line and in keeping with our own board policies that we have, which very clearly state that the board shall not adopt policy that's not recommended by the superintendent, because the superintendent is the educational expert that you hire to run the district. So I understand that there's a level of frustration, but it's not because we don't want to have the conversation. It's because the policy that we want, before you can debate it, we need to make sure that what you're presenting is actually something the district can live with. So you can debate it and adopt it, but then where are we at if we adopt it and it's not something that is legal or something that the district can manage? And I think that's the greater challenge when it comes to this and why we've ended up in this situation. I think there's a process forward, and I've kind of outlined that and articulated that, but that would be my recommendation at this time.
Yes, I'm not saying debate something and then adopt it there. There's a process to go through, but I feel like that process isn't clear. If it is Neola recommends stuff, then why aren't we just saying we want a student representation on the board policy, have Neola send us 100 examples of it, and we can pick? I mean, if the intent is for us to like find something that is the goal of the board, and not sure that that policy aligns with the goals of the board, are we then talking about the goals of the board or whatever Neola is going to tell us that we can have? Because like, to me, the student representation in particular is how we want to craft that. We send it to the attorney for review to make sure that it's compliant with, local, state, federal regulations. Neola can give us some examples, but ultimately, like, we're the board that determines what we want to do in terms of policy setting.
So I would speak to the student represented on the board from the policy committee perspective. And the issues that we had with that was, I agree with you 100%, Derek, in February was that big discussion. Everybody gave their input on students on the board. And towards the end of that conversation, you, Derek, made the recommendation for going to the students so that we could get a larger voice and a larger representation. And there were a lot of people on this board who were very excited about that idea of us going to the students. But then in March, when we sat down at the table, we were presented with this piece of paper with a policy that I have to disagree with you on this. It did not balance those two different ideas. It was back to one student representative sitting at this table. And that was where the policy committee had difficulty understanding what the board really wanted. That is why it did not move forward.
Elena?
What I keep hearing, it sounds like, is we have, on the one hand, policies that come up and that have details that need to be fleshed out that we agree on, and then there's a lack of opportunity for us to then flesh them out. So I guess my question as a new board member is, if there are things like this that are questions or that are concerns about legalities, details, et cetera, what's the action step? Where's the in-between? If it went to policy and there's concern, is it a work session? Is that what you're saying? This is the course of recommended action? I think that you said something like that.
So
what do we do next?
Yeah.
So how do we move forward?
So I'd like to circle back and do a committee of the whole and agree to meet to hash these things out. I found, I'm going to agree with what Cheryl said. Those were our reservations. And then I wanted to go a step further and add a few more things that we would be able to vet the students. As far as paying an attorney, Derek, we have our attorneys on retainer. And there are just a lot of the language. I was real concerned on not the student representation, the other two policies, I was very concerned that it could open us up to litigation. It's always about, we have to be real cautious. And we do pay Neola to keep us up to date with the law. We've got to follow the law. So yes, that's why Neola, it's the language, and we were at that meeting at least 2.5 hours, well, 2 hours and 15 minutes. We were there way after 6. And we really went over all of these. And there's just a lot of things that was, it was almost with the therapy dogs. Being a veterinarian's daughter, our business was dogs. And there are some things in that policy, it was opening the Pandora box. And we have to be real cautious that these policies stay a long time, even after we're not in office anymore. And sometimes there's unintended consequences, and that's why we are proceeding with caution and having lawyers look at the language. Our lawyer, Brad Banasic at the MASB, looking at things too. We're just being cautious. That's really it. And it's not that we nixed the student representation at all. We're going to bring it back. So,
Trustee Dobies, any last minute comments?
Yeah, there was a reference to going to the students and going to the youth. I have reached out to the student government, sent them the policy for review to their counselor, received some feedback. I think another comment about needing to follow the law, like, yes, it would be a big concern if this was a novel idea, but school districts across the state have therapy dogs. And I'll just kind of end on, we're airing a lot of concerns about, my point in all of this is we're airing a lot of concerns, and we're having a discussion here, which is good, about a whole bunch of policies that are all in different places. But like, my point is that we should be having this discussion in public. We're having a discussion about policies that nobody in the public in this room has likely seen, because they haven't been on an agenda. They have just were rejected from the last agenda and then taken up at the policy committee. I'm not sure what actual policies were taken up at the policy committee, because I'm not on the policy committee, but my intent is that we have the discussions about the merits of these ideas, what we want to see. And frankly, we had a long discussion at the first meeting about youth representation. It actually caused me to slightly change my mind, which is why I wrote a slightly different policy from when I said that we should just go directly to the people, to the students, and brought something back with the intent that we could start from there, debate that, and have that change and evolve, and get to a place where we could send it to Brendan or to Neola for feedback. So I'll close with that. Happy to continue having conversations about all three of those policies and issues, because I think they're important for us to discuss.
Well,
I'll just say, I'll meet with Brendan and bring these policies forward to him and have some conversation and report back out to the board.
So I'll just add that I think it's really important that we hear each other, as we have just done tonight. And part of the hearing each other is that, we don't want to report back. We want to hear from him directly, is one thing. The other thing, Neola should be willing to come at a time when we all are available to meet with them. That's really important, so that we all can be there. The other thing is that, if we want to be able to hash these things out in a way that allows us to, without being restricted by time, a committee of the whole, as was presented before, would be the route to go. The other thing, the last thing that I'll say, is that when we as board members, two things actually, for the last thing, us understanding the process for putting things on the agenda will be beneficial, particularly for new folks who are here. we should be able to list that out. This is the process, because, you know, Robert's Rule does allow us to add things to the agenda at the last minute if we want to. And we also have stated that, you know, send something to the board president at a certain time, and then they can add that to the agenda, because when, this is the last thing, when we as board members know our duties, we know our leadership, we know our responsibilities, we know our rights as board members, then we understand that we should be setting the board agenda together. That's a thing that we can and should be doing, which, you know, goes through the board president, but still we should be able to put things on the agenda whenever we want to, you know, given the process that we should be able to have stated and written out. And we also know that Jeff, as much as he is, and we'll say for superintendent, the superintendent, whoever they are, yes, we rely on them to give us their opinion, but as board members, we have the final say. That's why we've been elected to sit in these seats. He can say all day long, he, she, they, whoever that superintendent person is, this is not a good idea. But if we as the board say, yes, we still want it, then it becomes policy, whatever that is. Now, clearly we, you know, would take his recommendation, but when we know our roles, our duties, our leadership, and our responsibility, then we're not relying on him to tell us everything, whoever that person is, a superintendent, to tell us what to do. So it's important that we know all those things. But again, I'll end with, you know, if we want to be able to discuss these things appropriately, one, Neola needs to come when we are available, and that might look like here at the table with all of us, and then two, we should consider a committee of the whole.
Well, Ms. Hamilton, I can't promise that anybody
I'm
can
not
work.
asking you, Jeff, you know, that's something that we should be able to tell them. The board said, come here when we're
Please don't
available, and they should be
interrupt
able
me,
to
Ms.
come. That's it.
Hamilton.
You know what I mean? That's how
I'm
it
gonna
should work.
call the question.
But
At
bear
this
with me.
point, yep, we're gonna call the question. We've had a lot of conversation about these policies. We're gonna move forward with the agenda item. What I will end with, I'll make the final statement on this one and then pass it back to you, Jeff, for the recognition and superintendent's report. I will provide a narrative to the board about what Robert's Rules of Order indicates about the process in which we can add agenda items. I will contact Neola to see what their availability is. I do find that there's value in having an expert available for us to ask questions. They can be a sounding board. We can get some of that. It reduces the time in which these policies will need to be turned around. So if they can be here in the moment, that would be great. And then as far as the policies, I think I'll just agree with Cheryl, Marilyn, and Derek. Discussion must be had. If we're policymakers. That's part of our roles. I mean, that's part of our roles and responsibilities as board members. We were elected, and we do have an obligation to review policy, create policy, amend policy. And I think with all of that being said, we do need to bring those policies that are currently sitting within the policy committee, those need to come back before the board with some support from our legal counsel. Back to you, Jeff.
I think that's the goal. All right, enough hard conversation. Let's actually celebrate for just a moment if we could, because our board members do a lot of training, including some yet still coming up before the end of the year for some members. But the Michigan Association of School Boards is proud to recognize, and if you will all join me in congratulating our board president, Shalonda Hunt, on receiving her Level 3 Award of Distinction for her continued work through the Michigan Association of School Boards. All right, and with that, I'll stop talking and we'll pass this on to that'll close the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Jeff. At this time, I'll move to request a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Support from anyone.
Support.
Any deliberation?
Yes, I have one question, a couple questions. And we may or may not know this right now. Marcus, you might be the one for this, I don't know. But all of the folks that have retired, two questions, I think. All of the people that have retired, do we know if some of these ones who had gotten hired like around 2019 and et cetera, were they a part of the folks who got the sign-on bonus? Were some of those folks, did they get a sign-on bonus? I think we had about 9 or 10 folks that were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 folks, I think that were, 9, 10 folks.
That probably would be for Jessica.
Yeah,
Did they get the sign-on bonus?
I believe they would have had to have been hired in the 21-22 school year to be eligible for that bonus.
Okay, so
Yeah.
quite a few of them did. I think 2019,
It's
we
possible.
only had a couple of them. Did we have any conversation around that with regard to the folks, them retiring now? Getting, was there anything in that first, when you come on, we give you 15,000 or whatever they got, but if you leave too soon, you don't get the full amount? Was there some of that in there, or did they all still qualify for the full amount to keep the sign-on bonus and
It was
get-
paid over 3 years, so you had to
So they probably
be
got
here
it.
for those 3 years,
Okay.
correct?
Okay, so 3 years, that's good to know. Thank you. The last one I want to know, and you may or may not have this at this time. With the large number of folks that are retiring, do we know how that impacts that 4 million? Do we know what that number is sitting at now that we'll have to roughly know an idea of
We're
like?
still in the process of figuring out who we need to replace and who we don't need to replace, so we don't have that answer today.
Okay, so we don't know if we're like, we saved 2 million yet because we still have to figure out who we have
We're
to
still
hire.
working through that process.
Okay, okay, those are my questions. Thank you. Wait, I had one more. This is a food service program. Yes, the food service program. A couple questions around there. So with this program, is there any impact, I don't know who has the answer to this, any impact that we're gonna see from the federal government with this program? So it looks like the program's free and that we already had whatever, but are there any impacts that we have to be concerned about?
Potentially, we don't know where it's going to shake out. I know there's been talk of raising the eligibility rates for the CEP program. Currently, we're even higher than what they're proposing it goes to, but like a lot of things that are going on right now, it's just a lot of unknowns today.
And we're in year 3, so we only have one more year of this, so what's that
Thought
look
it's
like?
a 5-year, I'd have to double check, but I think we have another year or two. We were looking at maybe re-upping it now before anything takes place to give us a fresh set of years or whatever under the current guidelines. So we're looking at some of that stuff.
So it looks like the program will still be in operation regardless. Our best,
As of today.
so what's the re-upping part? Help me understand that.
So every 5 years, you have to recertify that you're eligible to participate in the CEP program, and I think that gives you 5 years, I believe.
Okay, and so we're expecting the CEP program to remain in effect regardless of what's kind of going on, maybe? We don't know.
There's no guarantees on anything right now. Just as of today, that's
I
the
think-
information that we have.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the conversations, we sit just under about 80% free and reduced lunch, and with the changes to Medicaid that are proposed out there and some of how they will calculate free and reduced lunch, that threshold could drop to about 65% ballpark. And if that does take place, then the question will be, what's the threshold required for participation in the CEP? And we don't know that yet. So depending on what happens at the federal level, that's the harder question right now that I got to be fair with you, just like we're dealing with some of the other policies or just like we're dealing with other areas from the federal government, we don't know that answer yet. And it changes daily.
And this is because this is a federal program, not state.
That's
That's why
correct.
it's, okay.
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
it's funded largely through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. But I would caution that even state programs, our state budget is largely backfilled by block grants from the federal government. I think the number I heard with regards to Gretchen Whitmer's latest budget was about 42% of her budget was made up of federal dollars. So even if it doesn't touch us directly, if it touches Lansing and then there's not enough dollars there, that could touch us indirectly. So there's a lot at stake there.
Point of order. Trustee Hamilton, typically in a consent agenda, if there's items that you want to discuss, you would request to pull those. Are you requesting to pull Human Resources 24, 25, 71?
So I just had questions. They answered them.
Okay, so that's a no, you don't want to pull them.
I just had questions. They answered them.
Okay. Any other deliberation? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none? Motion carries.
Before we jump on, Ms. Carter, I think you got a couple of folks you want to at least acknowledge while we got a minute.
Sure. We've been busy in human resources the past couple of weeks, and we've made several new hires, and some of them are here tonight. And I want you to help me welcome some of them. We have Destiny Davis, who's going to be our new principal over at Cascades Elementary. Destiny. Bobby Berkey is going to be our principal for instruction at Parkside. And over by Michelle Oxley, we have Sarah Ebersole, who's going to have a split assignment. She's been working exclusively with HR. She's now going to be half-time with HR and half-time the executive administrative assistant. So help me welcome Sarah. She's going to be your new contact as Michelle goes off for retirement. We'll miss you, Michelle.
Thank you. And I just did the math. This is my 324th regular board meeting, so plus any special meetings, so thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to your new positions. That's exciting news. And yes, Michelle, you will be missed. We appreciate your service. Is this your last meeting?
Potentially.
We appreciate your service. You've been amazing. All right, citizens requesting to address the board. We have two. And Joni, if you would come up to the podium, please, to the table, followed by Nicholas Thurston.
Thank you. I want to say that it's interesting that you guys are talking about policy, because the reason I start coming to the board 3 years ago now was because there's a policy that the school has for graduates, and it doesn't allow for any accommodations for someone with a 504 plan. It still hasn't changed. And I recently had someone send me a copy of the email where their child may not be able to walk graduation due to them having a 504 plan and not being able to complete their classes in time. This is a violation of their rights, and this is not fair. I appreciate that so many board members made comments about not understanding the policy or the process to get policies passed, because I'm just as confused, and I'm a lawyer. So you guys are talking about presenting language to lawyers. I review policies all the time for nonprofits, and I've never seen a process like this. 3 years when a policy clearly violates someone's rights. I chose not to sue the district, which would have cost them a lot of money, because I'd rather have action by attending the board meetings. And that has gotten me nowhere. Now I'm considering pulling my children from this school and having my sister pull her kids from this school, because it doesn't care about people who have special needs, and that's very clear. I am glad that there are several people who are in favor of transparency, because I'm in favor of transparency too. It's mentioned that the superintendent presents the policies. Well, I'm curious why my policy hasn't been presented to be changed. I'm also concerned that the superintendent has so much power here at JPS, including being the FOIA coordinator. It was brought to my attention that a certain email was sent by the superintendent about me personally, and I had my mom do a FOIA request, and that email wasn't included. And it was less than 4 days later, and the email I was looking for says, "While I appreciate this input and believe you want nothing but good things for JPS, Joni has been openly hostile over the past several years, often sharing inaccurate or misleading information at our board meetings. The committee is uniquely a JPS yes committee, and Joni has not to date shown herself as able to fit into this space. We are encouraging a diversity of thoughts about programming and needs for the district, but we are consistent in our message that this group is not an open to the public committee, but rather an invitation only for those stakeholders that can carry the water on moving a bond project from concept to completion. Joni is more than welcome to join our committee forum event coming up, where this group will share the work, concepts, and ideas with the general public. I am not against JPS. I have not been hostile. I have been focused on one policy that prevented my daughter from walking for graduation, that violated her rights. She has a 504 plan because she has a disability. I am very pro-disability rights. I'm pro-diversity. All my work is that. There are so many people that come up to me in the community and say, "Thank you so much for what you do. If you go into the JPS Montessori school, they're going to have positive things to say about me. I spend extra money and provide teachers books when my students are in their class. I go to all their events. I support them. I support the teachers. I support the local administration within the schools, and this is BS. I'm not against JPS. I'm not hostile, but I am against my daughter's rights being violated. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicholas Thurston?
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Nicholas Thurston. I live here in Jackson, Michigan. I live here in Ward 5. I was JPS alumni and also Jackson College alumni. I want to talk a bit about the policies and practices that are coming out of JPS and how they do not reflect the needs of the community and the current landscape that Jeff briefly mentioned and others also mentioned. That's shaping up at the federal government in their approach to education nationwide. I want to say that the previous speaker, I support what she's saying. I do believe that disability rights are very important and critical to education and making sure that, accommodations are being made. There are legal rights in this arena. People put a lot of work to make sure that there were protections in place, especially in the public school system. So I think you guys should take this seriously. There is a possibility if the board continues to promote DEI policies or policies like saying you will not cooperate with any law enforcement investigations or instructing your employees to do things that are illegal. You could lose potentially between $4 to maybe $10 million a year in funding permanently. So when there was concerns here, people came to me and said, "Hey, Nick, what's going on? Like, have you seen the news?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm seeing all this stuff." And they're asking me like, "Do you feel this way about me? Do you feel this way about, your friends that you grew up together with in schools?" And because my best friend still to this day is a Polish kid, was a Polish kid in Northeast. And, we've been lifelong friends. I don't think that anything will ever tear us apart. And, I did have serious concerns, and it was very bizarre to see that Derek Dobies, who promoted a non-discrimination policy at the city government level, there's this non-discrimination ordinance, that he would move on to the school board and then directly violate that law and encourage others on the board to violate that law. And also our state has some restrictions on race and sex-based policies and practices that the board is not adhering to. And so, I tried to at least figure out what was happening and see if it was true. And, sure enough, Keisha Hamilton said, "I don't apologize. I'm not sorry. Are you mad that I said it? Are you mad that it's true?" And then continues to say that all the white people are evil and racist. But when Jeff hurt somebody's feelings, he was very quick to say, "I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. And hope that you'll accept my apology." But big double standard there. When we contacted people in Congress and candidates that were run for office, we literally told them to give JPS $0 for the next 100 years in federal funding if these practices continue. We've also looked into local nonprofit organizations that are promoting the same things, and we requested the same. We also went to HUD and asked them to ban every single DEI contract that existed in the country. And we went down the list of every single government agency and department. And we also reached out to people in other states because it's not fair that this is happening to anybody. Derek, of all the people, you should have been the first one to say, "This is wrong and we're not going to do this. We're not going to tolerate this on the board." You should have been the first one to speak up for the customers here and the people that work here and the contractors here. Because you were the Mr. Spearhead of the NDO policy you're so proud of. But then when you get elected here, you do the exact opposite. And, there's just a bad track record of some of the stuff you promoted. You have a needle program going across the street that is killing people. That was yours. There's a big view on the news with a big smile on your face, shaking somebody's hand to install it across the street next to low-income housing. And one of the units was inside of the low-income housing. Then they started finding the workers dead inside of the building. You did that. Why did you do that? Now there's needles littered all around our city. This is a school zone. It's directly across the street from here. I requested that the mayor shut this down, the city council do something about this. No actions were taken. Shalon Hutt was on the city council at the time. No actions were taken. There's cops in our neighborhood all the time. It's never been the same since you guys did that. Why? I have no idea. Our current mayor also doesn't follow the law. Our current city council members, many of them don't follow the law. Our District 7 and District 8 county commissioners are in violation of law. Shalonda Hunt, you're like 5 years late on filing any campaign finance reports. You've never filed one? What's up with that? And you're the leader of the school board? And you want us to be proud of you? You want to make all the decisions for everybody else? We can't trust you. We cannot trust you to do the right thing. Period. And I've bit my tongue long enough about this stuff. I've tried to be nice about it, and a lot of people have come up here and asked you guys to change, and still they get nothing.
That's your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for our citizens requesting to address the board. Agenda number 9, discussion item, Neola update. Jeff.
All right, this one's first reading. And so there are a number of policies. Ironically, the very first policy is 0131, which talks about how Neola intends to look at and view the technical changes. A lot of times we see policies come back before us that are technical changes only. So in other words, they might be pronouns, they might be adding periods or changing how a paragraph is structured without making any substantive changes to the policy. And so I'd encourage you to kind of walk through that. There's other ones in here, obviously field trip immunizations, epinephrine and injections, student medications, personnel files, food service, wellness. There are several policies to be reviewed, and these will come back before the board. You can see the changes in your packet highlighted in green. And the strikeouts obviously are I think pink with a strikeout, so you could see the old language next to the new language. And then on the bottom, you'll see the US or the MMC number that refers to what law or this was referring to. So those are there, and this was first reading. You have about a month. If you have questions on any of the policies as you're going through here, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I will try to assist you with that discussion.
Thank you, Jeff. Item number 10, action item.
Discussion?
Any discussion?
Did you ask the chair first? No, I just. Okay, I do have some questions. So you went through, I think, a number of them and mentioned those that are, that came from the laws. Which ones specifically are not legal? So the ones legal as far as, we have some that come down. So just so the audience knows, there are some policies that come to us that we really can't make any changes with. Then there are other policies that we can make more changes with. Which ones are we able to make changes from among these that have been given to us? And I know there are some, within, but also within some of the policies that come from law, there are some specific that we can select, whatever. But generally speaking, which ones can we touch and which ones can we not?
I think every one of these is driven by law that I'm opening them up one by one, and every one of them you'll see the MCL or the US number at the bottom. There are a couple, the one I just jumped to is food service, and it has some options that you obviously can see, modifications, and we actually have our food service vendor kind of walk through how they'll handle, things of dietary restrictions or dietary needs. And so you can see that we've selected those options as far as what we can do. But when there's an option in there, it'll have an X in that option box, and it'll articulate end of option. Same conversation. Again, I didn't see one policy in here that wasn't driven by law, potentially with the exception of the very first one, that bylaw, which again was just a description of how Neola was going to approach technical changes of a non-substantive nature.
Thank you. So I'll add to this conversation that, for the board's sake and, community members, if you are looking at the policies, when it says MCL, and those are some letters, call letters basically at the bottom of the policy, that lets you know which ones we kind of can't touch. So when you're looking through the policies as board members, that was a question when I got on the policy committee years ago, how much latitude do we have and where at? And understanding that those that come down that have MCL on them, those are ones that we really can't touch as much. And as mentioned, Jeff just mentioned, there are selections that we can make. Just because the box is checked on your policy doesn't mean that's the one that we have to select. If you've been on the board any number of years, I've come back from the policy committee with the other policy committees members feeling one way about the policy and me feeling another way about the policy. And we absolutely can come back to the table as board members and say, I don't like that selection, I want this other selection. That's a part of our duties and roles. I'm looking at the wellness committee. This is a question, PO 8510. I'm seeing that does not have the MCL on there. So that would mean that this is not one that's sent by the state. Want to give a little more talk about this one, how this came about, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, bear with me while I open that one up.
It's 8510.
Yeah, that one's US law, so I apologize. If
Okay.
you were to look down at the bottom, you'll see USC 1751, section 204. And so that's where that one comes from. And it's essentially a non-discrimination statement from the federal civil rights law and US Department of Agriculture. So you'll see that in green added to the bottom of that policy. So that's the change there. And again, that one's driven by law. It just happens to be the US law, not the Michigan compiled law.
Okay, so good to know. So MCL is Michigan and US is federal.
That's correct.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yep.
The food service, I did have one question about this. I know we're going to have more discussion about it, or we're actually going to vote on it. And just so we know, this is actually our discussion time, part of it. We actually can have more discussion time later. But anyways, though, for this food policy, and you said that he mentioned some, the food service guy came and talked about some things, but the question I had, which he may have answered, but I wasn't there to hear it, do we always offer a variety of things? So like say I don't eat meat, and I realize in here in our policy that we're saying we're not giving any special accommodations to anybody, but do we still always have like a salad bar that's free for students that, don't eat meat or whatever? Do we always still have options is what I want to know.
Yes, every day there's multiple options for lunch at every level.
And they're free, that's what I want to know.
That's
as well.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
But we do have dietary restrictions. There are lots of folks who have issues with food, and we accommodate all of those.
Okay,
So-
I'm glad you
And
said
actually,
that.
that's checked in here, so.
Explain that a little bit, because I read where we were saying no, but just help me understand what I was confused about.
Actually, what it says is when requested for a special dietary accommodation is not supported by authorized medical statement or special dietary needs, such as that might be included in IEP or 504, the school cannot provide a modified meal. But if they have a 504 medical need or an IEP, then they can. That does not obviously disclude them from participation in grabbing a different choice for lunch, because there's multiple choices at the meal.
Can you kind of give me an example of what that exception might be? You said if they have a 504 and we have to accommodate, what's that
Think
look
of
like?
somebody that's got a gluten intolerance or a celiac or something like that can't have grains or something along those lines. Might be an easy example. A diabetic that we deal with and in every building who has to have very specific intakes. That may be something very specific that, again, would be driven either by a 504 or potentially an IEP if they have a restriction that way.
That's good. And how do we accommodate that? Help me understand.
They literally make the specific meal for that
Okay.
student.
Okay, so this is confusing then, because I'm reading at least in A, B, and C, I think it says the school district shall have no legal obligation to accommodate, which is why I was asking the question, do we have other options? But it sounds like we do have some legal responsibility to accommodate.
Yes, we do. And we do accommodate where necessary. Again, and again, I think you would find that every cafeteria is serving multiple meals. So there's choices for everybody.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yep.
Trustee Dobies.
On the first policy, 131.1, you said previously the board shall not adopt a policy that's not recommended by the superintendent in your superintendent's report. Is that in here under how we adopt our bylaws and policies, or is that in a different section?
I think it's in, I'm gonna get the wrong number here, 1240. So it's not in that bylaw, it's in the board policy, superintendent-board relationship.
Okay.
The, related to what Derek just mentioned, you said there's another policy that references this policy? Is that what did I just hear that correctly?
This is how Neola is updating their language. So when the bylaw that you're looking at, that we're being asked to consider from Neola is going to start to do some changes. And what they're recognizing is that there's a lot of back and forth on the technical changes. We see policies sometimes 2 and 3 times in a year because they make technical changes. And again, it might be something as simple as pronoun changes or something as simple as restructuring or reordering how things were in. And I think Neola is simply articulating in that bylaw how they intend to make those changes moving forward.
Did I hear him ask you a question around the board not adopting any policies unless they were recommended by the superintendent? Did I just hear that out of him?
That's in 1240.
It's not 12.4, I don't see it in
1230, go to the board superintendent relationship.
Is that related to this policy 131.1
It's
that he
not.
just referenced? Okay, so that's what you were correcting him on that.
1210,
1210, thank you.
1210.
And that's not in our packet group right now.
That's not a policy that Neola's adjusting today.
But you were just letting him know that it was not this one, right?
That's correct.
Okay, I was trying to understand where that was coming from. We should look at that policy too.
That's all I got on policy.
Thank you. Item number 10, well, that was just a discussion item, okay. Item number 10, action items 242578, custodial services RFP. Marcus.
All righty. I know we talked about this last month, both here and at the Finance Committee meeting earlier. In February, we put out an RFP for custodial services as our current contract ends at the end of this fiscal year on June 30th. We had a bid opening on March 13th. 14 vendors came to our pre-bid meeting, and we received 11 responses, as I mentioned before. Me and the facilities team narrowed the bids down to 4 companies with their closest office location listed. I know that question was brought up last month. There were no local Jackson vendors that successfully bid on this. So we have EnviroClean, DMBer, ABM, and GRBS. After reviewing the proposals, we're recommending continuing our relationship with EnviroClean for another 3 years, and their total contract price of that $6.8 million, which is approximately $2.2 million a year-ish. And then I know there was questions about whether the staff at these companies were union versus non-union. All of the companies responded to that question with the answer of non-union. And so at this time, the administration is recommending approval of the bid to EnviroClean.
Thank you, Marcus. Motion to approve this agenda item.
Discussion.
So moved.
Motion.
Support? Discussion.
I have a couple questions. Did you answer the question around local? What was the local?
Yep, I listed their most closest local offices on the cover sheet there, so there was none. They don't have local Jackson offices. I think,
The last question I have for you, we wanted to know, I wanted to know if we had customer satisfaction surveys, if we got, from all of them.
Yep.
Did you send that to us?
it's at the table there, I think Michelle put, oh, for all of them? No, I thought the question was for EnviroClean if we had customer satisfaction scores. So EnviroClean every month puts out a monthly report card that I included a blank copy of what they sent to the buildings. And the principals will fill that out with comments and grades. You do have a summary for the current year for all buildings and district. So the average score for EnviroClean throughout this year on the low end goes anywhere from 89 to almost 95% of satisfaction scores within our buildings. So given those high customer satisfaction scores, we just feel it's in our best interest to continue the relationship.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Marilyn? That was it? Okay. All right, any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. At this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break. If we can have a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion and a support has been made. We're going to take a break before we go into our work session with Mark. We'll be back in 10 minutes. All right, I think that was 10 minutes. We are going to reconvene. Thank you, everyone that have continued to stick around with us. We do have some business that we are about to handle. We have Mark Palmer with us tonight. Thank you, Mark, for joining us. We are excited about the information that you are prepared to share with us. I am going to pass it to you.
Okay,
Take it
well,
away.
thank you, President Hunt, and I'm happy to be here. I spent a couple of good days at Jackson Public Schools last week and got to know the community a little bit, and so it's good to come back and report on those results. We have a few tasks to do this evening. I want to report back on the results from the survey that was given to the community and staff. Once we do that, we also want to look at some of the responses from the face-to-face meetings that took place last week. And then we will go over what we call selection criteria. So it kind of gives you an idea as a board. We try to match it up with what the results were from the survey and so on. And, you know, I've made a draft and we can wordsmith that or change some things if you see it differently. But we always publish that so everybody knows. And then finally, at the end, and when we get to that point, we will probably ask that the live stream be shut off to discuss what questions you will ask in the interviews when they come up on the 28th. So, but for now, we'll just go as is. So, and please, if you have a question and I get going, just interrupt me and ask the question. So I don't want to be, don't want to miss anything. So you should have about an 18-page or so PDF of the results. I'm going to go through a PowerPoint here. Unfortunately, when you put it into PowerPoint, not everything fits. So this has all the, plus it'd be really small writing for some of it. So this will, this gives you all the information that came out of the survey. So as we go through the slides, it kind of matches, it should match what you have in front of you there as well. And I recommend, since it was asked by some of the community members if they would see these results, and this is public information, so it can be put on right on your website where you have your superintendent search information already, so in case you're wondering. So to start out, there were 161 responses to the survey. We had it out for about 2.5 to 3 weeks. This is a typical response that we get. Usually, anytime we can get over 150, doesn't matter the size of the district, it seems to be, that's the magic number, getting at least 150. And so we're just going to go through some of those results. Question one was, how long have you lived in the school district? And you can see it's nice because 72% of the survey, or the people who responded, have been here for over 10 years. So it just shows a commitment from people in the community. That's a, you know, it's not, it's kind of typical of what we see, but it's good to see that people were engaged on that one. If you look for how long you worked for the district, this is also another good thing. You see the blue is the 10%, or over 10 years, it's 30.63%. So 49 people have worked for the district for over 10 years, and that is something that came out in the survey as a strength, that there's a lot of longevity with people on staff, that they want to, they grow up here quite often, they come back and want to stay here. You can see 56 people do not work for the district at all.
So can I say,
Sure.
so by including the people who don't work in the district, does that kind of skew the responses for how long the employees, like if you look at the percentages, I mean, those numbers would change if you eliminated those 56 people who don't work?
Yeah, if you took the 56 people that don't work for the district, then you would have, out of the 160, you'd have you'd be taking your percentages out of 104. So yes, it would change it a bit. So for example, that if I'm doing my math right, it's been a long time since I taught math, but 49 were over, so you're approximately 49% would have been work for the district. So, yeah. Question 3 is which type of stakeholder the survey taker was, and you could check, you checked every box that you fit. So some people are employees, some have students, some are parents, they may be grandparents. They could fit multiple categories. So that just gives you an idea of what kind of, what roles some of the surveyors played in here. And you can see if you don't really like graphs, you can see all the numbers on the following pages. Next, we get into the question is, what is the minimum level of education you want the board to consider when evaluating candidates for a superintendent position? And they were to check one answer on this one. And you can see that a master's plus administrative certification was the top. This is highly typical of what we see. And it's this matched what I learned in the face-to-face meetings as well. So master's plus certified. I didn't switch, did it? There we go. Positions that you'd like the next candidate to have held in the past. And on this one, you may check up to 3. I'm going to say these are typical results. The top 4 are usually what we see on this. And usually, having been a teacher and a building principal is usually the top 2 almost all the time. So, and that also goes along with what I heard in the face-to-face meetings. We'd like to see somebody that's done several positions within a district. You know, they've been a teacher, they've been a building principal, they've worked in central office, done district-wide things. And quite often, yes, you do get as you can see, 46% were saying they would prefer that they've been a superintendent in another school district, so they have superintendent experience. It's usually a little bit higher than that, I think. The assistant superintendent isn't quite as close, but you see that there. And I think we're going to get to some of these. I apologize to the audience where you may not see all of it that the board can see. So these are specific areas of expertise that different superintendents candidates may possess. From your perspective, how much weight should the board place on each area? Rate the importance of each area using the scale to the right. Then the scale is basically, it's critically important down to relatively unimportant. And you can tell here when we look at this, so it's from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. Budget development and management is the #1 concern or #1 area of expertise that people chose here. That's usually in the top 3. It depends on the district and where your finances are at any given time on that. Public relations is actually quite high here, and that's usually down a little bit further, but public relations, and again, that I think goes with communication and engagement, being visible. Those are types of things that I heard when I went out to the face-to-face meetings. You can see all the other areas in there as well. So leadership styles. So you have 6 different leadership styles, and we all do something different at any given time. We're not wedded to one. This is the only one we ever use. So they were asked to look at the list and choose up to 2 management styles you would like to see in the next superintendent. And you can see here, 60.87% of the individuals chose a collaborative leader. And this is a leader leads by using consensus building and other group processes to arrive at mutually beneficial decisions. That was quite a bit higher, and that is not unusual. It also matched what I learned in the face-to-face. They would like a leader that will work with others, that will listen to others. You can't be an expert in everything. And so this is typical what you would see on position or experiences. Question 8. Experiences in, question 8 is listed below are specific experiences and skill areas that could be important when evaluating the superintendent candidate. From your perspective, how much weight should the board place on each area? Rate the importance of each area using the scale at the right. And again, it was at 5-point scale, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. And this is where it kind of gets cut off for the audience, but all of them are listed here, and usually they're all quite high because you get to choose 6. However, exceedingly responsive was the number 1, and that's also typical, exceedingly responsive, and I believe it's follows through and follows up was the question. A big one recognizes, values, and affirms staff members. That was a little bit higher than a lot of times that we'll see, so that was good. The one that I found very interesting, because you don't often see this, is the overarching love of kids. It's usually down the page a little farther. And it was high here at Jackson, so I think that's significant. So you can see the results there as you go down. And you all should have the numbers on every one of them. Question 9, personal characteristics. So these are what are personal characteristics that different superintendents could possess. From your perspective, how much weight should the board place on each personality characteristic when assessing each candidate? And again, it's a rate from 1 to 5. Number 1, honest and ethical. That's quite often the response that we get, and I think that we should all expect that from our school leaders. So, transparent was quite high. A problem solver, a strong listener is always up there as well. Approachable is typically up there. Collaborative again is up there. A strong communicator. As you can see, those are maybe not always right in that exact order, but that's kind of typically what we would see across the board. And you can see all of the. It's interesting because thick skin gets to the second page, and that's one of the things that people in the face-to-face meetings they brought up. So I came a little higher on the scale, I guess. Although I can't really measure it that way, but. Okay. In choosing your next superintendent, which path or strategy below do you think the Board of Education should take? You get to choose one. As you can see, 46% or 75 chose find a candidate with the same basic educational management philosophy as the current administration, but who can make some necessary changes. Following closely up with 65 people at 40%, find a very different kind of candidate who is ready to take the district in a significantly different direction. The bottom one there at 13%, almost is always on the low end. Usually the top 2 there are not quite as close, although this spring, interestingly enough, in at least one other district that I did, it was even closer than that, where it was almost 50-50 where they selected those two on top, so. Any questions about that portion of it?
One question for you, a couple questions for you. So we, how long did we have the survey out for?
It was about 2.5 to 3 weeks, I believe.
And we just got, if I'm understanding correctly, just 161 folks. That's
Yes,
the number of
yes.
people who responded.
Mhm.
Thank you, those are my questions.
Again, that's typical. And we had it out for about the same amount of time we always do. Most of the people do it within the first couple of days. Like I think within the first 3 days, there were 100 or something like that that were taken. And I know that a second reminder was sent out with a few days to go and to pick up a few more, so. Okay. The second thing, and I just stuck it in my papers here somewhere, is you should have a paper that I don't have. There's not a PowerPoint to go with this. So I met with a number of different groups last week on 2 different days. I had, I believe, 3 meetings with community groups, trying to do it on different days, different times to see if we get more to come in. 2 separate meetings for staff, and staff could go to the community groups if they wanted to, whichever time would fit best to them, for them. I had a meeting with building administrators. I met with union leadership. I met with central office administrators, at least ones that weren't considering putting their name in, and also central office support staff that work in that office. So I will say they were not real well attended. I think the administrator group was probably the largest group. There was good leadership meetings from the union leadership, but you know they usually send 1 or 2 per group, and when you have, I think it's 5. I believe all but 1 were represented at the meeting. So community meetings, the first night I had 2, and the second afternoon one, I think there were 6, I want to say, with a couple of those being staff members. And then the evening one, we had, I believe, another 6 at the evening one. Staff, we had none for the first session. And then the second one, which was right after that, we had, I believe, about 6 at that one as well. So it's not atypical. That happens quite often, especially it depends on what's happening on any given day and time, what the weather's like. If the weather is bad, sometimes people don't come out. If it's good, sometimes they don't come out. So you just never know. If they have events, staff, particularly, we had them right after school was out. Tried to stagger a couple times so you could catch people at the different times they get out of buildings. And, you know, this spring of the year, this time of the year, it's just, some of them are, and they have families, it's like, you know what, I just can't go do another thing right now. I need to, so that's quite often not unusual. So I asked for questions. So we'll look at the boxes here. And what I've done is I have summarized much of what I heard. And I tried to write down what was said. And each one I explained the process that we were going through in the interview process. So if we look at the box on strength of the district, you can see staff is caring, supportive, passionate, responsive, committed, and again, longevity in the community. And this really came from all groups. I mean, that's why I like to put those kind of things down, because there wasn't an outlier saying, you know, one thing or another. Almost every group somehow brought up the community partnerships that JPS has, and they continue to try to foster, whether, you know, just different agencies, that sort of thing. They're quite proud of the diversity of students and staff. I think a comment was JPS is welcomes all. Sorry, a little misprint there. It should say JPS welcomes all. I don't need the is in there, but very proud of the variety of programming. They feel like a secret of JPS is there is the availability of high academics, CTE courses, certainly early college, but not only in academics, but clubs, extracurricular activities. All groups felt that there's something for everyone at JPS. And on the other side of things, there's support for all. So whether it's academics, mental health, crisis situations, services for all students, they felt that they were that did exist here. I'm very proud of that. Facilities are well maintained, and a few comments on open to try new things. AI, artificial intelligence, and was one specific thing that was mentioned in the Tech Innovation Center. I wanted to put that in as examples of trying new things. Moving over to the challenges that will be faced in the next 3 to 5 years. Not a surprise, budget and finance was brought up. That's typical. Recruiting and retaining quality staff. Declining enrollment. And unfortunately, that's happened to about 70% of the districts or something like that in the state of Michigan. Many groups, community, staff, all brought up, they're seeing challenging behavior issues with students that, and that is something that I've heard in other districts I've been in. Everybody's been facing that, particularly after the pandemic. Changes in parenting style. I think that the perception of the district was really an important part of what people brought up. You know, they feel like if you're here, there's some really good things happening, but the perception from people outside is very different. So I thought that was interesting. The challenge of implementing programs, initiatives with fidelity. So for example, the PBIS, it's not really considered a program, but it's an initiative that positive behavior systems. Those are a challenge for every district, and JPS is not alone on that. So doing it to get everyone, every building to cohesively across the district to implement these types of programs is a challenge. And finally, one that came up several times are political issues, and really what was meant by that is like there's so many unknowns. What is going to happen with the federal education department? How is that going to affect JPS? That's going to be a challenge that it's just, as we all know, no one knows what from day to day what's going to take place. So that certainly was a concern on people's minds. Experiences that the next superintendent has had, this is typically, it mirrors what the survey said, which this did here as well. They really want them to have experience at all levels, district-wide activities, experience in urban and diverse settings. I think one person put it, I thought it was worded quite well, said, you know, we're a small town with really bigger city makeup and issues. So that's when she did, we have more urban issues. So that's kind of why I summed it up and put it that way. And it was brought up for a curriculum background, which was also in the survey as well. So There was, I didn't put this on here because they would have been conflicting, and so I'm just going to tell you about it. There was a couple that said the superintendent should be from someone outside the district, and then there were a couple that said it should be someone that really knows the district well and is committed to the community and has been here. So you got both perspectives. So I didn't quite know how to put that on here. I'm just going to tell you, I don't know if they really offset each other, but that was out there. Both those perspectives was expressed. And finally, what will it take to be successful? So this is really your personal attributes. Almost everyone said, and they would say this together, you need to be committed to the community and JPS. You know, it's many people see them one and the same, and which makes sense. Someone who has a presence or can command an audience is a great communicator, basically. That was an interesting comment that I usually get the great communicator, but when it was a person that talked about, you know, kind of when you walk into the hallway of the high school or wherever, you know, you just have that presence about you and people understand you're the superintendent and people are there to support you and listen to you. Again, kind of with a thick skin comment, ability to make hard decisions, a fresh perspective, and again, that's kind of along the lines of maybe somebody that's been outside, just a different perspective. Collaborative, that came up several times. A culture builder, build better relationships within buildings. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not certain I really read my own handwriting correctly, but I think there was also a feeling that the relationship between the superintendent and staff, students in the building is also important. Okay, it's going to be important to be successful. Several times open to other ideas, work with the staff, listen to other ideas. Willing to do things differently. Sense of humor came up. Someone with a vision, and I should have put on here not only vision, but willing to carry out that vision, stick to it and carry it out. Balanced support with accountability, that came very strongly. Again, strong community involvement. Personable, approachable, consistent, a forward thinker. Again, I always want to reemphasize ability to be humble and lean on others when you don't know the answer, because we don't know the answers to everything. And willing to go anywhere and talk to anyone in the community. So that's kind of a synopsis of what I had learned when I met with people. And again, I think it was a total of about 42 to 45, something like that. But I wanted to give you a picture of what was said. Many things mirrored what was said on the surveys. So any questions so far? All right. Now your first little bit of work here. So we're going to look at this one that has the Jackson Public Schools logo on it. And what we like to do is develop we particularly use this for external searches, but it's good for any search. We'd like to look at the survey results, listen to what you have to say, which we'll do at this point, and develop what selection criteria of what the community thinks you should be looking for in your next superintendent. So I'll give you a minute to read over this, if you could please, and then we'll talk about if there's anything you'd like to change, anything that you'd like to add, that sort of thing. So why don't I give you about 3 minutes to get through it, and we'll go from there.
Is it Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Where did this come from?
This right here? I made this from the results of the survey.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you want us what, to choose?
Well, I want you to look it over and read it over. If you feel like there's something you would like to add, if there's anything you'd like to delete, or maybe some wordsmithing of some things, changing up a little bit, because this is your chance, you get input as well. So you're the ultimate decision maker, so.
Because this will then be what you use to, what,
This would be really a guide for you when we're going through the interview process. You can kind of have this in mind and to help you select how you want to go about. This is what the community feels like they're looking for.
thank you.
In many ways, yes. I guess I missed that. Well, my girls tell me I don't have a sense of humor, so, I mean, I'm more than happy to do it. I know.
Mark, I like the content that's provided. Just, how does this align with our superintendent evaluation tool?
I didn't look at the tool to build this. I took the survey results. So there are certainly some aspects on here that you rate on the superintendent tool, but they're not all here. I see I have a typo in the second.
I like it.
I'm going to fix that second sentence in the first paragraph. It should say a successful candidate will strengthen relationships with community and staff. So, is there anything that you'd like to add? Change up the wording a little bit or anything?
Yeah. You said you're going to change the last sentence, successful candidate will strengthen, what is it?
Yes, because
What is
I missed putting the word will in there, and strengthening, it should be just strengthen relationships with.
Thank you. So vision, long-range planning, I would like to see develop and implement a strategic plan with the board. I want someone who's interested in that and who understands the importance of it. I have another one too, when you're ready.
Just a second, I'm
Okay, doke.
trying to plan in, I don't know if I like that word, but So I have written down, develop and implement a strategic plan in cooperation with the board. I may wordsmith that a little bit. Is everyone like that?
We can wordsmith it, but that sounds good as a start
Okay.
to me.
Okay.
The other couple that I have is just in the very next portion of it, desired professional experience. Central office experience, I don't think that that's necessarily important. That's just my personal opinion. Master's degree plus administrative certification, I would say a master's degree with the willingness to obtain it, with support from the board. I'm interested in someone who has a master's degree but able to get the certification. Is just my personal perspective on that. And then the strong knowledge and experience with school finance. I would say just a working knowledge, in my opinion. I don't know that they have to have super strong because we do have a strong finance director. And then the last one I would have, I need to better understand this demonstrated ability to develop and evaluate curriculum. Is that the idea that they have done it before, or what's that trying to get at for the next?
Yes,
person?
I think what we're looking for is what came out in the survey and in the conversations is someone that has demonstrated they developed and knows how to evaluate curriculum that you have in place.
So I don't know that I would make that a requirement myself, because I feel like we do have other individuals who could, be that sounding board for that person. I don't have a strong feeling on that one, though.
You're probably not going to have any candidate that will have every single one of these things.
So you just asked, so I'm just telling you what I had,
Okay.
what I came up with. But
Okay.
yeah, like I said, I'm not super married to that either way, one way or another, but that was just one that I looked at as well.
So could I ask, are there the rest of the board the master's degree plus administrative certification, that's not a huge thing. You can get administrative certification fairly easily. I shouldn't say easily. There's a process to go through. Usually if you attained your master's degree, you can, if it's in the right area, you can apply and you've got your certification. Eventually you have to have it, but you don't have to start out with it.
Okay.
So I personally would not choose to change that. I would like these bullet points to be our ultimate goals. I don't want to minimize criteria. And if you don't meet it, okay, but I would like to see these stay as they're stated. Yes, I want someone with a strong knowledge and experience with school finance. And if you don't, then I'll evaluate you accordingly, but I don't want to decrease the criteria.
Okay.
I agree
That
with
is
that.
true. These are ultimately an applicant may be able to highlight things a little more if they know because they'll see I recommend this gets published, and they'll be able to see the criteria that's here, and maybe they'll say, well, you know what, I have, I'm gonna make sure I highlight in my letter or whatever, my curriculum work. And again, central office experience doesn't mean they're all going to have it. But we can keep it there. We're never going to get at someone that has everything. So
I mean, I would be fine personally eliminating that one too, because honestly, I mean, what does it even mean? If you've been an administrator, what does central office experience mean?
yeah,
Maybe you
yeah,
were,
that's
there's so many roles in the central
Yeah.
office. I mean,
Right.
maybe you
Yeah,
worked for
okay,
human
that's a good
resources, I
point.
don't know.
That's a good point. Because you're really probably going to be looking more for district-wide responsibilities, I think is a better way to put it, that you've experienced maybe contract negotiations, or you've experienced building a budget, or you've experienced, so if everybody's okay, I'll take that central office experience one off of there.
I'm okay with that.
And I don't recall, where did we end up with administrative certification? I mean, we can go either.
I'm interested in not creating barriers. If they don't have to have it, if the law doesn't require them to have it upon hire, and it says that you can, that you are willing to get it, in my opinion, we should be willing to open up the space for that. We've already closed the search down to the school district only. At minimum, we shouldn't be placing barriers around individuals who may be in the district who, have a master's degree and are willing to. And clearly, if you have a master's degree, then you can absolutely obtain, the administrative certification.
If it's
So I
in,
would be
if it's in
interested
the right area,
open that
yes,
up.
yeah.
Just saying that you'd be willing to get it. And I mean, even I would be willing to say as well that the board will support you in that, whether we're helping pay for that or whatever. I'm interested in that. I would be interested in that as well. But I definitely don't think we should close it down to this administrative certification, because who's walking around with administrative certifications, just in general, what I mean, that are in the district. If you didn't have to have it, why would you have it? You know what I mean? So, but if you're willing to get it, I think we should open
Chances,
it up for that.
yeah, right. Chances are 95% of the people that apply in any position we have the certification already.
And again, we're saying these are desired
Right.
characteristics,
Right.
not
Correct.
required.
Right, and they're not required, and, because you can, if you don't have it, the district would apply for a permit, and the person would have to start a program within 6 months of hire, which there's a lot of different ways you can get it, and usually if they have a master's degree, that will just transfer right over, as long as it's in education. If it's not in education, then it's probably a few more steps. It transfers, I mean, it just transfers over to easily just sign a piece of paper and send in your check in, to be honest with you. So,
Is it that simple, seriously?
what's that?
It's that simple to obtain administrative?
Sometimes, if you've gotten your master's degree, yes. And then once you get it, you have to get so many hours, like 150 hours every 3 or 5 years,
Okay.
to renew. There's also the central office endorsement that they should have, which you get time to do that as well. Quite often they'll have the certification, but they don't have a central office endorsement. And you can go through you can go to colleges and get it, or I did a program through the Superintendent's Association, MASA, and it was great because I met with other superintendents about 10 times throughout the year. We did project and works on things that applied to our position, it was excellent. So that's not difficult to get either.
We could also list it as master's degree, it's in one spot, and another bullet point that says administrative certification preferred. Sometime when you're looking at applications and the wording is there, individuals may read it as I have to have this. So if we put the word preferred in there, then we know that the board prefers it, but that it's not required. That again eliminates that
Yeah,
barrier.
we can do that. I do that quite often, actually, so I'll do that. Okay.
I just have one. In addition to the strategic plan and maybe facilities planning, somewhere in the vision long range planning, I think Trustee Hamilton suggested. I'd like to see maybe to sub out central office experience in board relations and governance. Something like that. I think the rest of these kind of talk to teaching experience, building level administrative experience. You got a master's degree, you got knowledge and experience with finance, student achievement, and curriculum. The rest of those bullet points, I think.
So experience in board relations and governance.
Yeah.
That's well said.
That's an important part of, managing down
yes.
throughout the schools, and then
Yes.
also managing up to the board.
Okay, so I'll clean this up and I'll send it to Ms. Saxley tomorrow at some point. And you can put those wherever you have the posting, along with the survey results would be great. And yeah, so, okay, at this point, we're gonna move to the questions. And I'm going to